Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn Zero Lost, hosted by the Magic Engineers. I am Sherry, and today we are starting our first series through Magic's history. We will be looking at each of the sets throughout Magic's history, and we decided we'll start today by picking a random set, and we chose the Dark. So, the Dark is the fourth expansion of Magic as a whole, so it was very, very early on, released in 1994, and this was how would you just
weird, very weird set.
It was
Old.
It was very weird because it was old, but also I think the big thing is that even though that the old Magic story was actually a little bit incoherent at times, there feels like there wasn't a story in this set. It was only really told through flavor text and the short story. The short story was basically about two wizards fighting, saying, "Oh, you're dabbling in the black magic," and then the other one saying, "Hey, I've dipped into blue. I've done all this, and it corrupts you, and how bad it is." It basically tells a story after the Sylex Blast and the Brothers' War. This is the events that technically precede Ice Age. So, and that's kind of just the overall story of it. Did I summarize it pretty well?
I think you got it.
Yeah. And basically it was the first inspiration of like kind of that old English, that old kind of what's like
the Anglo-Saxon style of writing that they like to go with.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon, this is like Innistrad before Innistrad, but it's actually on Dominaria. It's like everyone wants to get all the pitchforks and everyone's religiously zealots, and it's an overall very weird set. So a couple of days ago, we had the honor of drafting the set, not in person, but we did this online through Untapped. And what are your guys' thoughts about the draft environment?
So first of all, we should clarify that this isn't actually a proper draft environment, because this was back in the days where expansion sets only had 8 cards per pack. So you can't really draft it unless you went with like a 5-pack draft, which I feel like would take much longer. But the draft environment here is weird.
Yeah,
like everything else in this set.
It's not like a normal draft environment where it's curated to be coherent together. A lot of the cards are very disjointed. They're meant to work with cards in the sets around them rather than just in that set by itself.
Yeah, you can tell this was designed before the era of draft really became a thing. So they didn't really design it with that in mind. With that said, though, there's definitely some archetypes you can go with here. Goblins are all over the place in the set. So
there's anti-goblins.
There's anti-goblins.
Which is basically running white, because they're primarily anti-goblin and aggro.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like forest walk or land walk effects in this set as well, particularly in green. Like I feel like a third of the cards in green have some kind of forest walk or evasion based effect, which is kind of interesting. In addition to that, I think this was also the first time we've seen a multicolored common in Magic, which is interesting. I'm not sure which card that was. I think it was there's only 3 of them in the entire set, so it's not that many. I think it's probably Marsh Goblins or Scarwort Goblins.
Either or,
because those are kind of the only 2 that really make sense.
As a note about these rarities, also they are much different than typical rarities. So the way it worked back then was that they had technically only 2 levels of rarity. They had common and uncommon in this, in how it was curated. But they had different levels of common. So there's one card that was common 1, and there's 40 cards that were common 2, and there were 41 commons total. Then there were 78 uncommons.
Yep.
35 of them were uncommon 1, and then the other were uncommon 2. So then the uncommon ones were technically more rare, the rares of the set, but they weren't treated as rares. So in a weird way, there's actually like 78 rares in this set, but not really. So it's kind of strange.
Yeah, very difficult to kind of go through and select cards too, because you weren't sure what was really good for the deck you were trying to build. Yeah, especially when you opened up the pack, unless you saw one of the big chase cards for this set, which we'll be going over most of those in a bit, you didn't really know what to grab, because you're like, the only thing I know how to grab is to stay in my lane, so I guess this piece of draft chat will work for me just fine for this deck.
Yeah. I also noticed there's a lot of cards in this set with big splashy effects that cost gajillions of mana to cast. Like Leviathan is probably the most obvious example of that possible. It's just a ridiculous, funny card that is very impractical, but can win the game in the right situation. Same with stuff like Hidden Path, which is, 4 green to cast something like that is just insane, but it's also very good if you get it out. And there's a fair amount of artifacts as well that are interesting. I think I might be mistaken here, but I think this is the first appearance of Felwar Stone.
Yes, it is.
So that's pretty cool. And there's a few other artifacts and lands that will bear mentioning for reasons both good and bad as well. It's, as I mentioned before, it's a very different draft environment that isn't something you see anymore because it's not designed for draft, and you can tell.
The interesting thing was that I actually think white as a whole is the best color of the set, but we saw only the worst cards in white of this set, at least in our packs that we had.
Yeah, white. I would like to point out a few color pie breaks in this set as well that I noticed reading through the cards. So Witch Hunter is a Timmy card in white, or a Prodigal Sorcerer in white.
With also a bounce effect.
It also has a bounce effect, yep. So that's fun and interesting.
Preacher as well.
Yep.
That straight up steals other people's... Well, technically, the way this worked, I'll read Preacher.
Sure.
In the modern card language, because I don't need to read a paragraph. So Preacher is a 1 white Hewing Cleric, and has, you may choose not to untap Preacher during your untap step. It has tap for as long as Preacher remains tapped, you gain control of target creature of an opponent's choice they control. As far as I know, this might be the only white card that does that.
That does steal effects like that, or
that does straight up steal effects like that.
Yeah,
that are only white.
Yeah. For blue, I would like to call out as well Erosion, and I think what was the other one? There's a Mind Bomb. Yeah, Erosion is a blue land destruction, and Mind Bomb is blue direct damage.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
That's actually kind of the route I took during my draft, was blue land destruction with like a little bit of black control pieces. So, and I did a Mind Bomb in there, which was, I was like, this card is nuts.
Yeah.
Because either a straight up discard spell if you choose it to be, or it's a straight up damage spell if they choose it to be. And that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty nutty. I'd also like to call out Word of Binding for black creature tap as well as Merfolk Assassin for blue off, giving repeatable creature destruction. Very narrow creature destruction, mind you, but still creature destruction all the same.
Yeah, so it was a fun draft environment because we all got to pick our lanes. And honestly, I don't think the AI that we were going against really understood how to draft this either. So they kind of kept in their lanes too, and everyone had fun.
Okay.
I would also like to note that there is a green steal an opponent's artifact in this creature, in this.
Oh, Scarward Bandits?
Yeah.
Oh, that card's so sick.
It's the most fair steal card. It's basically extorting someone for their...
Yeah. You pay 3 mana and tap down this creature that can go in to force an opponent to pay 2 mana. Ah, yeah. Classic Magic.
Well, it's actually technically a little bit better than the Preacher because you gain control of it if they don't pay the 2 straight up, and you don't have to keep it tapped.
That is true. Yep. Still, though, like you're paying 3 mana and tapping down a creature to force an opponent to pay 2.
I think one of the weirder effects too that I saw in there that I picked up these cards just because like I needed to get green cards was a Spitting Slug. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, you know, if it's going to become blocked or block, you have to pay 2 mana, like 1 and a green. Otherwise, it gains first strike if you do. Otherwise, each creature blocking or being blocked by Spitting Slug gains first strike.
Yeah, it's like, very, very strange effect. Not really sure what they were going for on that, other than to force you to pay 2 to put this thing in combat.
Yeah, that's literally the only reason. It's like it's a weird downside to give it that ability.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on, we wanted to each list our favorite cards from the set. David, would you like to start first?
Sure, I'll go first. So the first one I'm going to pick out is not a particularly good card in any format other than the Dark Draft, which, why are you playing that format? but Ghost Ship. It is a 4 mana, 2 generic, 2 blue, 2/4 flyer. Pay 3 blue mana to give it to regenerate it. Pretty simple, pretty nice effect. I mean, yeah, it's actually kind of a bomb in this format, which is saying a lot about the quality of old creatures in Magic.
Yeah, it's funny that it has 2 upsides, and then it's a 2/4, but it's like looking at all the other creatures, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense in this. Also, it's a fun errata to a spirit instead of being just a ship.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I dig that. The second one that I would like to call out is Eater of the Dead. It is a 5 mana, 4 generic, 1 black, for a 3/4. I believe it's a horror. Yeah, it's a horror in the errata at least. You pay 0 mana to take 1 to. Pay 0 mana. If Eater of the Dead is untapped, exile target creature card from a graveyard and untap Eater of the Dead. I think this card actually has some pretty decent combo potential. There is a cap on it because you need creatures in the graveyard to make it work. But I think it actually could be a pretty decent piece for more narrow decks to utilize in some sort of untapping combo shenaniganry.
And remember, this is in a graveyard, so it's not just to
Yeah.
your graveyard,
Correct.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of like this card. If I can afford it, I would like to work it in a deck some point, just because I kind of like it.
I mean, I think it said it was only $15.
There's potential there. Then might be able to make that work. And the third and final one that I would like to call out is Dust to Dust, which is a 3 mana, 1 white sorcery, exile 2 target artifacts. That's it. That's all it reads. I like this card for 3 reasons. 1, it's pauper legal. 2, it's 3 mana. And 3, it exiles 2 artifacts. Like, it's really as good as it sounds. The only downside is it goes at sorcery speed, but that's honestly kind of negligible considering the sheer power of the spell.
Is it
Wow.
popular?
Yes, it is.
That's pretty good against the current meta, isn't it?
I mean, Affinity got nerfed into the ground pretty hard, so
That's
Yeah.
very right.
yeah. But I'll probably even run this at Commander. That's how good this is. Still really good. I actually think I like it better than Return to Dust, which is kind of like the de facto white artifact removal.
Isn't it like slightly cheaper than Return to Dust too?
It is. Yeah, it's 3 mana as opposed to 4. But you can only cast it at sorcery and you can only get artifacts with it.
Right, yeah.
But I think that's a worthy trade-off.
Eli, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can do it. First card I got here, Goblin Wizard. Goblin Wizard is a Goblin Wizard. Who would have thought? It costs 2 red, and it has on its abilities, tap, you may put a Goblin permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Pay a red, target Goblin gains protection from white until end of turn. It's a 1/1.
This card is
Yes,
this is really good, actually.
This is good by old and new standards.
Yeah.
correct. If this card wasn't, I think, $60
Or
right now,
83.
83.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Reserve List.
Yeah, if it wasn't that amount of money, I think I would have it in my deck because this is really good for getting goblins on the battlefield for free.
Yeah, I think pretty much every Goblin deck out there wants this card.
Yes, and that's probably why it's so much.
Yeah, probably.
Pretty simple. Goblins. Another simple card coming up here. David mentioned it before. It's Hidden Path. Basically, all green creatures have Forest Walk, so that's a universal effect. It costs 4 green and 2 generic. Simple enchantment. I'm a simple man. I like evasion, and giving everything Forest Walk, and then having a Yavimaya Cradle of Growth out. There's no blocking my creatures. Have fun. There's no blocking anyone else's green creatures, but if you're running this card, usually you're probably in a game plan that results in you winning with it out on the battlefield.
I mean, I would hope so. You paid 4 green mana.
Yes.
You're
You're gonna be in a mono green deck to run this. If
you
you're
want
not
to deep with it.
if you're not mono green, don't run this card.
Yeah, Galta loves this card.
It sure does.
Yes, it
The last one is City of Shadows. It is a land that taps, you exile a creature you control, put a storage counter on City of Shadows, and then you can tap and add colorless for each storage counter on City of Shadows. I think I didn't even know this card existed before we did this draft. Not gonna lie. I did not pick this card up during the draft, but I did see it in one of the packs, and then it went by, and I disappeared. Don't know where it went, but it disappeared. And for me, in the modern era, this is a lot better than it was back then, because the trade-off of you just exile a token to get it started, and then you can do a lot of proliferate shenanigans to make this go really big, so you can tap it to add a ton of colorless mana. And
I'm kind of medium on this card because I think there's way easier ways to exile creatures for fast mana, particularly the Goblin or the Simian Spear Guide and the Elvish Spear Guides in particular stand out to me as being much stronger.
Absolutely. There are much stronger versions, but I do not care.
You know what?
I think that this is on a land, which is what makes it pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fair.
There are more optimized versions of all sorts of strategies out there. I sometimes don't go with those because I like the flavor. I love the art on this card as well.
It is very pretty.
Sherry, it's your turn. That's what your favorite cards were.
So first off, we're going to be the little bit of control player in me, and we're going to go with Mana Vortex. Mana Vortex is 1 blue enchantment. When you cast this spell, counter it unless you sacrifice a land. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a land. When there are no lands on the battlefield, sacrifice Mana Vortex. I'm a sucker for land destruction spells, and this is a land destruction spell.
In blue.
It's off color. It's wonderful. I love old Magic, and I like the art on it. I like the typhoon that's coming out of whatever gross lake that is. I'm a simple man. The next one is a ubiquitous card among our modern legacy players. It is Blood Moon. Blood Moon is 2 in a red enchantment. Non-basic lands are mountains. That's caused no rules headaches whatsoever in the history of Magic.
No one's ever forgotten about a Blood Moon on the table, ever. No one's ever gotten salty at this card. It's totally fair Magic, and there's never been a problem with it ever.
Fair and balanced Magic. 100%.
Absolutely.
No one has ever had to learn the layer system because of this card.
Definitely not.
Moving on. Next one is a famous card, especially in EDH. It is Maze of Ith. It is a land. It has untapped target attack of a creature, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to and dealt by that creature this turn. Is a land that removes things from combat. What can't you like about it? Maybe the art, because the art's kind of gross. But
yes,
other than that, I think it's a wonderful card.
There's one thing I don't like about this card, and it's the fact that I usually don't have it on the table.
Yes.
So
absolutely hate this card for that reason alone.
Only for that reason. Absolutely.
Well, it hurts when you don't have it.
That's what I'm saying.
See, if you look at the newer art for this card from Double Masters, it's less gross.
Yeah.
You feel a little bit
cringe
better
a little less.
I actually like the DCI and Judge Promo ones personally, but I can't afford any of those. But
yeah, nobody can.
Yeah.
That's it. The Judge Gifts cards were this one. The one for it is, I'm going to get this art just because cool looking.
$199.65.
Yeah, $199.65. Beautiful though.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are our favorite cards. As a whole, this set is, I would say, it has had a pretty good impact on Magic simply by like outlining what colors shouldn't do.
Yes. Surprisingly.
Pretty damning example, really.
It's part of that. It's also like Blood Moon is a modern staple. Maze of Ith is Commander staple. And at one time, I could presume it being a land has made a difference in probably land stacks and Legacy.
You got Felwar Stone as well for the Commander side as well. That's a very popular and stable mana rock for the format.
Yep.
And you got some cards in here as well that can also add to it. Like Marsh Viper is, pretty solid, a toxic / poisonous creature. Even now,
it's even pre-poisonous. It is just you get
the poison
poison.
I know Elves of Deep Shadow also came from this set as well, and that's also a very popular card.
Basically a format staple.
Yep.
I will have like a more hidden one that's had a lot of influence probably outside or in the designing of the game. It is Inquisition. It is look at target player's hand and does 1 damage for each white card in their hand.
That's Inquisition. I know was a pretty popular choice to counter a lot of white strategies.
Yeah, it counters white because white, I believe, at that time was the best color in Magic.
It was pretty dominant at the time, so
Yeah,
it does not surprise me.
and it kind of like led into like your Inquisition of Kozilek's, your Thoughtseizes.
Thoughtseizes, Duresses, so on and so forth. It was kind of like the prototype for a lot of the black discard that we see today.
Yeah, but it was before they actually decided to add discard
Yeah.
to it. So which is interesting.
Also,
Go ahead.
Also, a point of note, I believe this is also the first set with a non-creature multicolored card with Dark Heart of the Wood. So,
You are correct, I believe.
yeah, so that's a neat little ticker in this, feather in this set's cap. It's not very good, but hey, that's not important.
I would also like to say this is the first time Tormod's Crypt was printed.
That
I
is well,
believe.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first printing. It's a Stone Calendar is also another fun card for your making things cost less. It's a 5-drop, but it's got interesting art, but it makes things cheaper. And the most amount of lands I've seen that aren't actually don't actually have mana abilities.
Oh yeah, how could we forget the most important card that came out of this set? Path of Sorrows, or Sorrow's Path.
Yeah.
The rules headache that this card is.
Just as it is like borderline unimaginable. And when you actually read the errata, it somehow becomes worse.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Is this the worst land in Magic?
This is like the worst card in Magic, period.
Yes. It's one of the worst. And
I wouldn't go as far as
it's not
to
a
say it's-
vanilla.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the worst, but this is definitely like probably the worst land I can think of.
I would say this is among one of the worst cards in Magic, even regarding that it's a land. It's a land that doesn't produce mana, that damages you when you tap it, and each creature it deals damage to your own creatures, and then messes with the combat. And then if you make it a legal block, it becomes really confusing.
You know,
There have been 7 rules clarifications on this card.
yeah. I will say though, I'm gonna find a way to make this card playable. I'm gonna put it in a Rage deck and somehow make it viable.
Listen, if you can explain this card in one sentence, I will let you play this card. But I don't think you
Let
can
me play this card.
I don't feel like fighting with you about rules for a half hour because I will do it.
I'm not disagreeing with you on the rules. I'm just saying like I want to make it playable. You know what I mean? It's a challenge.
I get that. Another fun land from this set was actually pretty interesting. It's a Safe Haven. It's pay 2, tap, exile target creature you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice Safe Haven. If you do, return each card exiled with it onto the battlefield under its owner's control.
Yeah, I kind of dig it because you can like stack blink effects on top of each other, then just unleash them all in one upkeep.
It's kind of bonkers.
Yeah.
Like it's like it being a land, it's kind of crazy. Do you guys have any other thoughts on the set?
No, I think my thoughts are pretty clear on this one. It's very shrug, but it's done enough.
Yeah. If I have to give this set a grade, I'd say like C- maybe.
Give it
It's fine.
I'll give it like a C.
I would say a C in modern context, but in a old context, I presume this might have been okay. So a solid C+. Well, thank you for tuning in today, starting our series on each of the sets in Magic. Thank you for your time, and y'all have a good day.
Bye-bye.
See ya.